heal as a team, we're going to crumble. Inch by inch, play by play, till we're finished. We're in hell right now, gentlemen, believe me. And we can stay here, get the shit kicked out of us, or we can fight our way back into the light. We can climb out of hell. 1 inch at a time. You know, when you get old in life, things get taken from you. I mean, that's part of life. But you only learn that when you start losing stuff. You find out life's this game in inches. So is football. Because in either game, life or football, the margin for error is so small. I mean, 1/2 a step too late or too early, and you don't quite make it. 1/2 second too slow, too fast, you don't quite catch it. The inches we need are everywhere around us. They're in every break of the game, every minute, every second. On this team, we fight for that inch. On this team, we tear ourselves and everyone else around us to pieces for that inch. We claw our fingernails for that inch. Because we know when we add up all those inches, that's going to make the fucking difference between winning and losing. Between living and dying. I'll tell you this, in any fight, it's the guy who's willing to die who's going to win that inch. And I know if I'm going to have any life anymore, it's because I'm still willing to fight and die for that inch. Because that's what living is. There's 6 inches in front of your face. Now I can't make you do it. You got to look at the guy next to you. Look into his eyes. Now I think you're going to see a guy who will go that inch with you. You're going to see a guy who will sacrifice himself for this team because he knows when it comes down to it, you're going to do the same for him. That's the team, gentlemen. And either we heal now as a team, or we will die as individuals.
Ideas are bulletproof.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another live edition of Down the Rabbit Hole here on the Orion Talk Radio Network. I am your host, Popeye from FederalJack.com, and tonight I have a very special guest for you. A couple weeks ago, and on many other numerous occasions, I have played Colonel L. Fletcher Prouty. I have played audio clips from Leno Senek over at Black Ops Radio when he interviewed Colonel Prouty on many different things. Peak Oil, Gary Powers' YouTube, I always say YouTube, U2 flight, and other things. And after I recently made a page on Federal Jack for Gary's flight, or I should say information coming from Colonel Fletcher Prouty about Gary's U2 flight. And I got an interesting email. It turns out his son, Francis Gary Powers Jr., saw the page, and he wanted to, he's tried to get in touch with Leno Senek, and Len is kind of hard to get in touch with. I myself have had trouble getting in touch with him. And he hasn't been able to get out his story, his father's version of what happened, right from the horse's mouth, as it were. And I was pleased to learn that he'd be willing to come on my radio show. So tonight, my special guest is the son of Francis Gary Powers, Mr. Francis Gary Powers Jr. Gary, welcome to the show. It is an honor to have you here, sir.
Hey, Popeye, glad to be with you. Thank you very much for the invite.
Let's get right into it, because the first segment, we got about 7 minutes left here. So let's get right into it. You contacted me and you were telling me that although you agree with Colonel Prouty on many things, one of the things that you differ with him on is your father's U2 spy plane flight. So go ahead, and I'll just give you the floor and you can pick up with the information. I guess start with the information that you have that wherever you want, because I know you have a ton of it. Start with the stuff that shows how Colonel Prouty was wrong in his take on the whole thing.
Right. Well, first, what I want to do is set the stage and give a quick overview of the U-2 incident and what took place. And then once I've told you what my father believed happened, we can talk about Prouty's views, his views, references, citations, and evidence to support what I'll be telling you.
Perfect. So let's go into it. Go ahead and set the stage.
My father was recruited by the CIA in about 1955. He started training for U-2 missions in 1956 at the ranch in Nevada, the Watertown, Area 51. He started flying U-2 flights out of Turkey between 1956 and 1960. Not only would he fly out of Turkey, but he would ferry U-2s over to Pakistan or to Japan or Germany or England, wherever air bases were that needed planes to fly over parts of the Soviet Union and other Eastern Bloc countries. On May 1st, 1960, he took off from Peshawar, Pakistan, very early in the morning. He crosses over the Soviet Union's border at about 68,000 feet. He starts to flip on and off the camera switches that will take the photographic imagery of the ground below. He's 4 hours into his mission. He's now at an altitude of 70,500 feet over the city of Sverdlovsk, which is in the central part of the former Soviet Union. There's a bright orange flash. Shockwave hits the plane. The controls no longer respond. The nose starts to pitch forward. The wings snap off. And my father finds himself spinning down towards the ground in the wreckage. He falls from 70,000 feet to about 30,000 feet before bailing out of the aircraft. He does not use the ejection seat. If he did use the ejection seat, he would have severed his legs off. The U-2 cockpit is very small, very tight, very compact. In order to eject, you have to be in a perfect position, or else you could lose a limb. Realizing this, he does the following. He opens up the canopy, which floats off into space. He undoes his harness and is immediately sucked up halfway out of the aircraft. He is still connected by his air hose. So here he is, half in the plane, half out of the plane, spinning down towards the ground. He can no longer reach the destruct button on the dashboard or the front section of the airplane's cockpit. Realizing he can't reach the destruct mechanism, realizing he's getting closer and closer to the ground, he breaks free of the air hose. He falls free of the aircraft. His parachute opens automatically at 15,000 feet. He parachutes down to the ground. Once on the ground, he lands on the outskirts of Sverdlovsk at a collective farm. The farmers and the kids working the fields with their parents rush up to him. They help him with his backpack, his parachute, his helmet. They start to ask him questions in Russian. Well, Dad doesn't speak Russian. He shrugs his shoulders. That makes one of the farmers a little nervous. They hold a pitchfork up near him. He's able to communicate in the dirt, USA, so they now know he's an American. Moments later, there's a black car that shows up. The black car my father did see as he was parachuting down. It was following his descent. Two men get out of the car, put him in the back seat, take him to a holding area in the central part of town. And there, for the next few hours, he's asked some basic questions by someone who speaks broken English. Basically, who are you? Where'd you come from? What are you doing here? To which my father would reply, my name is Gary Powers. I'm lost. I had a mechanical malfunction. Can you take me to the American Embassy? No, that's not permitted. Can you take me to the American Red Cross? No, that's not permitted. And so this is how it went the first few hours of his capture until the KGB showed up from Moscow. Two armed guards took him by transport plane to Moscow, then shuttled him over to Lubyanka prison by car. So that's the gist of the U-2 incident and the events that surrounded the shoot-down. According to Fletcher Prouty, there's a conspiracy, there was sabotage, the CIA tampered with the oxygen canisters. In one report, Fletcher Prouty changes his story, and he says that the U-2 landed and that my father intentionally landed the plane. And all these things are various components of the misinformation, the disinformation, the conspiracy theories that have circulated ever since this event took place. when Fletcher Prouty was alive, when my father came back home, it was very hard to get information. It was 1962, the height of the Cold War. The CIA liked the fact that all this misinformation was out there because it kept their secrets secret.
I'm going to cut you off right there, Gary, because we're going to get cut off by the break. But I agree. I often tell people when they bring up researchers from work from 20 years ago, and they say, well, what about blah blah blah? They've been proven wrong. And I often say, well, if they had the internet, they probably would have realized they were wrong a long time ago if they were still alive, and they would have probably said, hey, my earlier take on things was a little off, but they can't. All right, ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned. We'll be right back. Don't go. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back, and I'm sitting with Francis Gary Powers Jr., the son of Francis Gary Powers, the famous U-2 spy plane captain. And we're talking history, ladies and gentlemen. We're talking real, true history. You get the chance tonight to sit with somebody who has inside knowledge about a historical event, and you get to have the unfettered truth about the incident right from the horse's mouth. Well, or I should say as best as you can get. One step away, I guess, right from the horse's mouth. So, Gary, getting back into it, we were talking about the differences in Prouty's version of events versus what your father said happened. And we were talking off air, and there was a few things that you wanted to get into. A couple things from the videos that Lena Senek has, and I posted on FederalJack. There was a couple things that you wanted to cover. So go ahead and take the floor.
Sure. Thank you. First off, I just want to say that I have the utmost respect for Fletcher Prouty and for Len Osek. We have talked in the past. I was able to talk with Fletcher Prouty by phone before he died, and we debated back and forth, and he told me his version of what he thought happened, and I told him my version of what my dad and my research says happened, and we continued to agree to disagree. So we never got convinced on either side as to who was right or who was wrong. But now that 50 years has gone by, there's been so much evidence and information that has been declassified on both sides, from the Soviet archives and the American archives, that the full picture of the CIA, the full picture of the U-2 incident has been established. And there's no conspiracy theories. There's no sabotage by a Norwegian spy who planted a bomb. There's no flame out. There's no CIA tampering with the oxygen canisters. There's no forced landing or belly landing. It's now shown and proven that Dad was shot down at altitude at 70,500 feet by a Soviet 75 Diva, what we call an SA-2 missile. In Fletcher Prouty's videos that's on your webpage, there's two sections. One section talks about the video for about 10 minutes, and the next section talks about the same video for about 12 minutes about the U-2 incident. In the very beginning, he talks about how the British had U-2s. Well, that right there is false. The British government did not have U-2s. There were some British pilots assigned to the CIA that were flying U-2 missions. But the early U-2 program between 55 and 60 was a CIA black program. What's his name? General LeMay wanted hand over fist to get control of the U-2s, but the CIA had control of them for the first 5 years. After the shoot down, the Air Force stepped in, and it was more of an Air Force program. Fletcher Prouty is correct that it was a joint program. It was a CIA program that was offset, augmented, assisted by the U.S. Air Force at U.S. Air Force military bases with U.S. Air Force personnel. But as far as the British having U-2s, no, that's just completely incorrect. One of the British pilots is a personal family friend I know, and I'm still in touch with. So I can verify this through him. He and I have sat down over some coffee and have chatted about these things over the years. In Fletcher Prouty's first video, at about minute 6:15 into it, he's talking about the intact tail section and how it was a belly landing and how the plane came in and as a forced landing and therefore the tail section was intact. After the shoot down, after the near miss, the shockwave hits the plane, the tail section is separated from the main fuselage, the wings break off, and everything flutters down in very big pieces. It doesn't fall like a nickel, it falls like a leaf that's fluttering down towards the earth, and it hits the ground and it gets crumpled or pieces fall off. The next video at section 4.13, 4 minutes and 13 seconds into it, he's talking about the U-2 crash at Winterberg, Germany, and shows a plane, a picture of the U-2 that had a flat spin stall and crashed in the middle of a forest. And in that picture, the tail section is intact. So in the first section, he's saying the tail section shouldn't be intact, but in the second video, he's showing that there is an intact tail section from a flat spin of a U-2 plane. So it contradicts itself right there. So these are just some of the arguments that I have talked about and have tried to show to people who believe the conspiracy theories that it's wrong. And I can point to other sources. Bridge of Spies, The True Story of the Cold War, by Giles Whittle, came out last year. And on page 167, it talks about the Soviet version of the event and how at 8:52 a.m. Moscow time, the two Soviets, or the Soviet people at the missile base, were yelling fire. They shot the missiles off. We watched the two dots, Voronov says, bringing his two old hands together above the table in his front room near the Black Sea, and then we saw them hit each other. In Moscow, it was 8:53 a.m. Powers felt it was a whump, not a bang or a crump, but a whump. It was not a word he would have used if he were making it up. He had made his left turn and noted down his speed and altitude and exhaust gas temperature when the sky went orange and the whump hit him in the back. Good Lord, he said to himself and maybe to his helmet, I've had it now. He knew the plane would probably break up, but for a few seconds it stayed in one piece. His right wing had dipped, so he pulled left on the yoke and seemed to be flying level again. Then his nose started dropping, so he pulled back on the yoke, but this time it kept on dropping, and the aircraft started to describe a big, slow arc from the horizontal to the vertical, gradually losing all its forward speed and converting some of it to downward speed in the sickening inverse of a zoom climb, leaving Powers looking straight down at Russia and realizing he had probably lost his tail. So that's the Soviet archive version and the American version combined. There's a recently declassified document I just received last week, February 24th, from the Acting Information and Privacy Coordinator for the CIA. And this is titled Francis Gary Powers, The Unmaking of a Hero, 1960-1965. And on page, what page is that? Page 17, it starts to talk about his debriefing when Dad came home and was debriefed by the CIA. Their debriefing lasted about 2 weeks. Powers also had some polygraph testing during this period. The results were very different from what had been anticipated. The debrief team was totally satisfied with Powers' behavior. They found that the confession of a CIA employment for which Powers had been so bitterly criticized was permitted by regulation. DPD Order Number 6, published not long before the last flight, authorized the pilots, if forced down in hostile territory, to acknowledge their true employment contrary to the agency risk of capture regulation. Following his own principle, quote, don't give them credit for knowing more than they know, Powers had told the Russians nothing except the obvious. He was even successful in gaining acceptance for a false altitude figure given by the Soviets as 22,000 meters, which is relevant to about 68,000 feet. His big disappointment was that he could not seem to convey the information to the agency that he was shot down at his assigned altitude. Soviet surface-to-air missiles were capable of tracking and reaching these flights, and no more flights should be made at that altitude.
I'm going to cut you off right there, Gary. And when we come back, that's an interesting point, and I want to pick up right there, because you made a good point during the last break that a lot of this information that Prouty had and a lot of these conspiracy theories regarding this came from the fact that the CIA didn't even believe that the plane was shot down originally. So, ladies and gentlemen, think about that. We're going to break. Stay tuned. We'll be back in 3 minutes. Don't go anywhere. All right, Gary. So when we got cut off by the break, I was explaining to the listeners how some of the theories about the sabotage with the plane, where they came from. And like we were talking during one of the breaks, I'm pretty sure that if Colonel Prouty had access to the internet the way we have access to it now, he was still alive. And knowing, seeing what's happened in the past 10 years, I would bet he would he might have at least access to more information. And he might have, who knows, he might not have changed his mind. But a lot of these theories about the sabotage stem from the fact that there was no internet back in the 60s. It was, whatever got mailed or what was ever in a newspaper, or if it got on TV or the radio. Mm-hmm. And it took much longer to come by this information. Researchers now, compared to researchers 40 years ago, it's amazing. Researchers 40 years ago, they would spend a month to put together a 2-hour radio show, and I can do it in an hour and a half with the internet. Yep. It's amazing how technology has helped us. But like you pointed out, some of these incorrect theories stem from the fact that the CIA themselves did not believe that the Soviets shot the plane down. They were convinced that it had to be something else because they didn't think they could shoot it that high, and they didn't think they knew the operating altitude, correct?
Correct. And, there's a couple of things that I have to go into here. One is an NSA listening post had picked up the Soviet chatter, and also something to the effect of the Soviet radar or tracking stations were showing that the plane had zoomed up to 75,000 feet and then was doing a slow descent down to about 30,000 feet, and then it had been hit. That has been shown to be Sergei, I think it's Menyukov's Su-9. Su-9 pilot was ordered to ram the plane. Well, he was going so fast and the U-2 was going so slow that he overshot the U-2, zoomed up to 75,000 feet, was low on gas, and then had to come down lower in his descent, which the NSA took to be the U-2. Well, that's been shown to be that. The other thing is in regards to Dulles. Alan Dulles testified in June of 1960, 1 month after the U-2 incident. And during his congressional testimony, to all the congressional folks up at the Capitol Hill who were very upset that this is going on. What happened? America has been embarrassed. Eisenhower has been caught embellishing. They wanted answers. And so Dulles goes and testifies before Congress, and he says that the most likely cause of the capture of this plane was a flame out. And at that time, this is what the CIA believed. They could not bring themselves to believe or confirm that it was a Soviet SA-2 missile, a S-75 Diva, that reached the altitude. And just like the weapons of mass destruction under Bush, sometimes the CIA gets it wrong. There were certain aspects that were close enough to be, hey, this is the most plausible explanation. Well, when Dad comes home and is debriefed, all of a sudden they realize, okay, they do. They can shoot down the U-2s. They have improved their weapon systems. They do have these new SA-2s. And this goes on to be proven and confirmed October 1962, the Cuban Missile Crisis. An SA-2 shoots down a U-2 over Cuba at 70,000 plus feet. There were 5 or 6 U-2s shot down over mainland China in the 60s by SA-2s. Very little known, but it's out there and it's proven, and I've got photographs of it. So it is shown that Dad was the first one to be shot down, and then subsequent to that shoot down, there were others.
And again, none of this is really known to the general public. Most people only know of your dad's plane, if they know of that at all. I mean, nowadays the general public is so dumbed down they probably don't even know the full story of your father's mishap there. But
right.
None of this information, even this is new. I didn't know that they had shot down. I had heard before about the Cuba thing, but I'd never known about the U-2 planes being shot down over China. That was news to me, too.
Yep, that is shown and has happened. I got a picture on my wall here of, I think, 5 of them in, what's it called, the square. There's a square, not Red Square, that's in Moscow, but in China, in their pavilion, where there are 5 U-2s lined up with the tails, and they're on like wooden crates, and they're all smashed up and in different configurations. They've reassembled them. I'm going to go to here a book. It's called The CIA and the U-2 Program, 1954 to 1974. It was produced by the Center for the Study of Intelligence and came out in 1998. In 1998, there was a declassification conference hosted by the CIA and the U.S. Air Force at, I want to say, Fort McNair in Washington, D.C., and it talked about the U-2 program and what led up to it, and there were several medals awarded to folks and the survivors of loved ones who died in the line of duty while working on the program. It was a wonderful tribute to our heroes who were doing these reconnaissance missions back in the 50s and 60s. And on page 176, it talks about, I'm just going to read it verbatim here, May Day turned out to be a bad time to overfly the Soviet Union. On this major holiday, there was much less Soviet military air traffic than usual, so Soviet radars could easily identify and track Power's U-2. In addition, the Soviets responded to the intrusion by ordering a ban of civilian air traffic in a large portion of the Soviet Union. Ordering a ban on civil air traffic. Soviet radar began tracking the U-2 when it was still 15 miles south of the Soviet-Afghan border and continued to do so as the aircraft flew across Central Asian republics. When Powers reached the Sverdlovsk area, as many as 13 Soviet interceptor aircraft scrambled in an unsuccessful attempt to intercept the plane. Powers never made it past Sverdlovsk. 4.5 hours into his mission, an SA-2 missile detonated close to and just behind his aircraft and disabled it 70,500 feet above Sverdlovsk. The plane began spiraling down toward the ground, and Powers looked for a way out. And then it goes into how he used his wits to get out of the airplane. In my father's own book, Operation Overflight, that he published in 1970, about 7 years prior to his death, he's talking about another thing that Fletcher Prouty had mentioned in his video. Somewhere in the video, he's talking about how the CIA or someone had planted all of these IDs and identifications and driver's license and NCO cards and all this other stuff in his in between the seats and the survival gear or something to that effect. And this is another falsehood. In my dad's book on page 54, I was thinking about this as early on the morning of Wednesday, April 27th, I packed a bag for the trip. Should I stay in Buda a day or two, I'd need to have a shaving kit, civilian clothes, ID, and money. Checking my wallet, I found I had some German marks, Turkish lira, and about $100 in U.S. currency. Estimating that should be sufficient, I tossed the wallet into the traveling bag along with the other items. And then in about another page, he goes, after talking about his preparation for the trip, as I was suiting up, I remembered the traveling bag with the wallet, clothing, and asked that it be put in the cockpit. So right there, he's talking about bringing his ID and his personal items so that he could be prepared in Buda when he landed, so that he could have identification when he goes off base. Another thing here is about the altitude. On page 61, my father basically says right here, following the return, I had to record the time, altitude, speed, exhaust gas temperature. I think I already read this in another book that was quoted from here, from my dad's book. I was marking these down when suddenly there was a dull thump. The aircraft jerked forward, and the tremendous orange flash lit the cockpit and the sky. Time had caught up with us. Knocked back in my seat. I said, "Oh, my God, I've had it now." So these are just things that are right out of my father's book. And even after my father was debriefed by the CIA, it was not permitted. The CIA didn't do much to help set the record straight. And I'm going to read something here from Khrushchev's Cold War. That is by Alexander Fursenko and Timothy Naftali. And that was published, what year is this?
I'll have you pick it up on the other side of the break because we're going to get cut off. But I find it interesting how the CIA chose not to go ahead and clean up the mess of all 18 different versions of what happened out there.
Yeah, they like the misinformation. It keeps their secret.
Yeah, they like it messy like that. It makes it harder for people to find out what's going on. All right, ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned. We will be right back. Ladies and gentlemen, Gary has been kind enough to hang out with us until the second hour. He's going to hang out with us for the first segment, and we're going to get into a few other things. Originally, he was only scheduled for 1 hour, and he's going to do an extra 10 minutes with us. So I want to give him a big thank you for that. I know it's late. So since time is limited, let's get into, there's two other things I wanted to ask you about, and we've talked about this off air, but I wanted to get into it on air. Prouty had mentioned that the camera that was in there, that was in the plane, wasn't the proper camera. And I wanted to know what your dad thought about the fact that Eisenhower, it was this whole peace accord. There wasn't supposed to be anything up in the sky, and he was sent up. Obviously, they don't, they're at a base. They don't know what's going on. They're just being told what to do. But I after the fact, I wondered if your father had any take on that. Like, if there was, did he ever wonder who sent him up? Like, who gave the order to go? Because Eisenhower has admitted that, and I've seen evidence that he didn't realize that was happening. So I wonder who told them to fly the plane. You know what I mean?
No, and I don't know. I don't have a reference cited for that, but I know from my research and my reading, President, and I think it's through Chris Pocock, a leading U-2 historian and expert on the U-2 program and U-2 incident. He has confirmed and has shown that each Soviet overflight was personally authorized by President Eisenhower. The other border flights and what they would call milk run flights were done at the CIA discretion with their planners on to get certain information. But every Soviet overflight was personally authorized by Eisenhower. And Eisenhower set a deadline of May 1st, that no flights could take place after May 1st because he didn't want it to interfere with the upcoming Paris Summit Conference. April 9th was the last flight prior to the May 1st flight. On April 9th, the U-2 cameras brought back pictures of the SA-2 installation near Sverdlovsk. The May 1st flight, one of the targets was Sverdlovsk, to confirm whether or not that missile base was functional, was operational, and Dad found out firsthand that it was. So that's what happened with May 1st. In regards to the cameras, I've never heard that before, that the camera was substituted or switched out. Now, I am looking on your website, video number 1 at section 317, 3 minutes and 17 seconds, and that's the camera that is inside of the Air and Space Museum in Washington, D.C. at the Looking at Earth Gallery, and that is one of the U-2 cameras. I do know that the U-2s were outfitted with several different variety of cameras. Some were detailed for focused imagery straight below them. Others were configured to take pictures of about like a not a 360, 180-degree view from left to right. And there were different cameras used on different missions. Fletcher Prouty in his video talks about how this camera had been substituted and that an RB or an old bombardier camera was put in. And I happen to have to disagree. The picture that he shows at 3 minutes and 25 seconds on that first video is the camera that was in my father's plane. That is on display at the Central Armed Forces Museum in Moscow. I've been there. I've seen it. I've given interviews. I've lectured there. This camera is not a small bombardier camera. Half of it is covered up by the parachute. It's approximately the same size as the first camera he shows, but this camera was used for a different purpose. It was a U-2 camera. It was not a bombardier or a different camera from the World War II era. And so there are different cameras used for different U-2 missions, and whatever camera was on Dad's plane was the one that was supposed to be on for those particular missions. In regards to one of the things that's going to wrap this up here, right now is the 50th anniversary of the U-2 incident. The U-2 incident was May 1st, 1960 to May 1st of 2010. This year, February 10th, 1962 to February 10th, 2012 was the 50th anniversary of the Soviet exchange for Rudolf Abel and my father. Then, yesterday, March 6th, was the 50th anniversary of the Senate Select Committee hearing in which my father testified before congressional leaders, Senator Russell, Barry Goldwater, Prescott Bush, and a few others, and got a standing ovation as a result of what he was able to relay to them about the mishap. I'm going to read one more segment here. Powers stood trial in August of 60 after the shoot-down, 3 months of interrogations, and then he was stood trial in 1960 and was sentenced to 3 years in prison and an additional 7 years in hard labor. He was exchanged for a Soviet spy, Rudolf Abel, in February 62. Although the U.S. government negotiated for Powers' freedom, he returned home under a cloud. The American people and Dulles' replacement as CIA Director John McCone believed that he had been disloyal under KGB interrogation. McCone set up a board of inquiry under federal Judge E. Barrett Pettyman to the CIA to investigate Powers' actions. The board determined that Powers had not been disloyal. The Senate Armed Services and Foreign Relations Committees also investigated his actions, but these investigations, like the assessments of the Pettyman board, were kept secret, thus denying Powers the opportunity not only to clear his name, but to gain public praise. The KGB records of Powers' actions under interrogations remain closed until the publication of this book. And that is from Khrushchev's Cold War. That was published, I want to say, in 2006. So it just goes to show that after 50 years, the Cold War ends, the Soviet archives open up, the American archives are filled with declassified documents from the CIA and other agencies, and historians at later dates can fill in the missing pieces and give a better account of what took place that will show the truth of what took place versus the assumptions and theories of the time.
And you actually helped create a museum dedicated to the Cold War to archive a lot of this information and other things. I'm assuming artifacts as well. We have a few minutes left, so we can touch on it a little bit, but what we'll do is the first segment of the second hour, I want you to go into that a little bit and cover the museum and what got you into it. But we got a few minutes. So in your research, obviously you've been researching for years. I'm assuming that once you were old enough to, understand things that you could read, you started devouring information about all this, correct? Because I'm sure you sat and talked to your dad and he just told you anything that he could, correct? Or did it take you years for him to talk?
Well, that's correct. I was about 10 years old in 1975 when I started to read my father's book. And he would come in, tuck me into bed. I'd ask him a couple of questions about the book, and he'd answer them. I have vague recollections of this. It's been, 35 years now since then. And some of what he told me has blurred with some of what my mom's told me that's blurred with some of what I've read. But it's all up in the head somewhere. And one of the things I remember asking him, I was always, curious. Dad, how high were you flying? Well, I can't tell you that. Well, why can't you? I'm your son. Well, if I tell you and you tell your friends and your friends tell their parents, then the information could get to the wrong hands. I'd be giving away secrets. I could jeopardize other lives. I can't tell you. I would pester him night after night. Dad, how high were you flying? Dad, how high were you flying? And eventually he got so upset he just got so aggravated that I wouldn't give up on this that he said, Gary, I wasn't flying high enough. Now go to bed.
That's funny.
Yeah, if he had been flying high enough, he wouldn't have been shot down. So that's one of the stories I remember my dad telling me when I was a kid. Another thing I remember him telling me was the interrogations. And he told me that the first 7 days he was lying to his captors outright, misleading them any way he could. Then on May 7th, international headlines around the world, the KGB interrogator comes in, shoves a newspaper, the New York Times, in his face, yells at him, "You've lied to us. You told us you were trained in Arizona. Well, the New York Times says you were trained in Nevada at Area 51. You might as well tell us everything. We'll get it out of your American press anyways." And all of a sudden, my dad was taken aback. He could no longer lie to these people because the press would betray him. They would, contradict what he was saying. So from that moment on, for the next 3 months, my father told the full truth when he knew they could verify the information in the press, lied to him outright when he knew they couldn't find the information, such as names of pilots, number of missions, specifications about the equipment on board. And then he gave a part truth, a part lie, dance around the subject when he knew they knew something about the question they were asking, but not enough to contradict what he was telling them, such as the altitude he was flying. My dad always maintained throughout the interrogation and when he came back home that he was at the maximum altitude of 68,000 feet. But, of course, that was about 2,000 feet below he was flying as a way to not give away the secret information.
Roger that. All right, ladies and gentlemen, you're just going to have to stick around. Gary's going to be hanging out for a little while into the second hour, so stay tuned. Don't go anywhere. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back with hour number 2 here on Down the Rabbit Hole. It is March 7th, 2012, and it is my honor to be hanging out with Francis Gary Powers Jr., son of Francis Gary Powers, famed U-2 pilot who was shot down over the Soviet Union in the 60s. And Gary's been nice enough to extend some extra time to hang out with us. He was originally only scheduled for an hour. He's doing a little bit of an overdrive session with us here. So, Gary, I don't want to waste any time. You created a Cold War museum to showcase the Cold War itself, or what? Get into why you created the museum, what was your drive, and what you guys have, and who's involved.
Well, sure. When I was growing up, I always realized that Dad was shot down over Russia and spent time in prison, was exchanged for a Soviet spy, came home and was a TV personality for the evening news, flying helicopters, reporting on news in L.A., California. So for me, as a kid growing up, I just thought this was normal. And all of a sudden he dies on August 1st of 1977. I'm 12 years old. And I realized that, oh gosh, not everybody's dad does get shot down or imprisoned or is in the Cold War history books. And so I was very confused. I didn't understand the situation. I was trying, he was dead. I couldn't ask him any questions. So throughout high school, I was very introverted, trying to cope with what has taken place and who I was, who he was. In college, I came out of my shell. I was trying to find out more about my father. I started doing research. First on the U2, I wanted to learn more about my dad. So I started asking my aunts and my uncles and my mom and my sister all these questions. Well, the more I learned from family about Dad, the more questions there were. And I realized I had to learn more about the Cold War and the U-2 incident to understand my dad. So that's where my research led. I started talking to CIA officials and Air Force officials and people who flew with my father during the U-2 program in the military, trying to find out as much as I can about the U-2 incident and the U-2 program. Well, the more I learned about that, the more questions there were. And I realized I had to understand more about the Cold War to understand the U-2 incident, to learn more about my father. So that's where my research led. In 1992, I moved out from Los Angeles, California to Washington, D.C. area, Northern Virginia. I went to school at George Mason University. I did a master's degree there in public administration and nonprofit management. And during this time, I started to give lectures to high school students in Fairfax County, Virginia. 9 times out of 10, I'd walk into a classroom to give a lecture on the U-2 incident. I get blank stares. The kids in these history classes thought I was there to talk about the U-2 rock band. So all of a sudden, I realized this light bulb goes on over my head, and I realized that I need to help preserve this Cold War history. So in 1996, I helped to found the Cold War Museum to honor Cold War veterans and preserve Cold War history. For the first 10 years, I was a volunteer helping to move this effort forward, spearheading the effort, looking for funds, looking for artifacts, trying to get support any way I could. Over those 10 years, and really the last 15 years now, we've been able to amass a collection of over $3 million in Cold War artifacts that are in storage at Vint Hill, Virginia, or included in our small museum at Vint Hill that's now open to the public on weekends. The Cold War Museum is dedicated to preserving the history between 1945 and 1991, the end of World War II, to the collapse of the Soviet Union. We're not just looking at the American viewpoint. We are looking at the international aspects of Cold War history. We are looking at both sides. We're going to give what the U.S. government says happened. We're going to give what crew members say happened. We're going to give what the Soviets or the other side says happened. And then the guests who come to the museum can make up their own mind as to what the truth or not is of these various events and activities. For example, we have items from the USS Liberty, the USS Pueblo, overhead reconnaissance platforms from the U-2, the SR-71, some spy satellites. We have the largest collection of civil defense items in America, having helped to save and salvage the Civil Defense Headquarters in Washington, D.C. So our collection is very broad. It covers a lot of information. We're trying to make sure that we preserve this Cold War history and honor these Cold War veterans. My father is very well known. He got caught spying for our American government over the Soviet Union. But there are hundreds of thousands of other men and women who fought, sacrificed, died for our country during this global international war. This World War III was the Cold War. And we want to make sure that they get their recognition, that their stories are told, that their history is preserved, so that future generations can learn, understand what took place during this time period, and relate to how it is today.
I think it's awesome that you have information about the USS Liberty. I mean, it's awesome that you have information about all of it, but it's really awesome that you have information about the USS Liberty, because most people don't even know about the Liberty at all. I would consider myself a history buff, and not until about 5 years ago did I know about it. And I was a sailor. I had no idea I had no clue at all.
I have been fortunate enough to have been invited to the USS Liberty reunions. I've lectured before their crew members. I have befriended their crew members. Having read the various reports from the U.S. government, having read the reports from the Israel military, having read the crew members' own reports, my feeling is that you got to believe the horse's mouth. You got to believe the people who were there. And the crew members have a very compelling argument as to the attack was intentional and not an accident. Time will tell. Another 50 years, more declassification documents will happen. The people who were in the know at the time will be passed away. It won't be an embarrassment anymore. It'll be history. Historians can review it, and they can write the truth.
Yeah, that's what will happen. The truth will eventually come out, and they'll just put their own little spin on it. But they usually wait until everybody involved is dead so that they can't be prosecuted, sued, or gone after in any sort of way, shape, or form. It's sad that they do that, but that's the reality of it. I'm glad that you actually put this whole museum together. Where can people go to help out and help? Because I know the museum, obviously, I'm sure you guys charge maybe $5 or whatever to get in, or if you do, I'm not sure. But even that doesn't cover the cost of housing all this stuff and maintaining everything. Where can people go help you guys so that we can keep history alive? Because this is something that bothers me. When it comes to the Cold War era, I grew up kind of in the middle of the Cold War. So I remember being, hiding under your desk in case a nuke went off, which would have done nothing. I don't know what. Looking back in retrospect now, I'm like, wow, that would have really done nothing, but whatever. So I guess I have a personal attachment to it. And something that really killed me and really made me realize how bad education was in this country, and not just because I know what's going on through research and stuff, and I see how things are federalized and all this other crap, but just because I know that history is forgotten about. I talked to a young girl a long time ago, and she said to me probably about 3.5, 4 years ago now. At the time, she had just graduated high school about 6 months before, and we were talking about history, and I was telling her a few things, and she said to me, "Oh yeah, I just learned in school about Kennedy because I'd mentioned JFK," and I said, "Oh yeah, well, when he got his brains blown out," and she said, "Whoa, he was shot?" And I said, "What do you mean he was shot? What, you don't know? I looked at her like, you didn't know he was shot?" And she looks at me and she said, "No, we were just taught that he died." And I was like, "They didn't tell you that it was because of a metal projectile going through his forehead in the middle of the open plaza?" And she's like, "No, they didn't get into that."
Concerning the attack,
and you only have 3 months to teach 200 years of history.
I was just flabbergasted. All right, I'm gonna talk to you during the break. Gary, thank you so much for coming on.
Just mention the link to coldwar.org, www.coldwar.org. They can find out all about the information for the museum.
Coldwar.org. I'll make sure I plug it again coming back in. Thank you, Gary. And
all right. Thank you, Popeye. Nice to talk with you.
Honor, sir. I'll talk to you during the break. I'll say goodbye to you. Stay tuned. Ladies and gentlemen, don't go anywhere. We will be right back. We are back, ladies and gentlemen. Awesome interview. Gary's a hell of a nice guy. Very smart, knows his stuff. And again, he's not he doesn't look at this like he doesn't attack conspiracies at all. But if there is a conspiracy theory about something and it is wrong, it does need to have the truth come out. And like I said in the first hour, and Gary brought it up as well, that given the internet, if Colonel Prouty were still alive now with the information, the way we could get information now, he might have a different view on things. But back then it was much harder to get information, and he was going off a lot of the information that even the CIA didn't think it had been shot down at the time. So I'll leave it up to you to decide. I'll never force you to decide what you should believe or what you shouldn't believe. But I am honored that I was able to get Gary on and have him come sit with all of us and tell us, as you're going to get from him pretty much from the horse's mouth. His father's no longer with us, so the only way you're going to get any of the information is going to be from Gary. So I'm glad I was able to get him on. It was very interesting how it happened, very synchronistic. I told him that it was very synchronistic, and he was actually the one that made the observation about it being the 50th anniversary and the way everything kind of unfolded. So maybe it was meant to be. I'm glad I could be part of bringing history to you all. All right, there's a few other things I want to get into, but before I forget, I want to plug his site again, because you might not have been able to hear it going into the break. Coldwar.org. Coldwar.org. If you can, I'm not asking you to, go give 20, 30, 40 bucks, but if you can, give $5. It helps. And it's cool that they're putting all this information about what happened, the facts. And again, I have to respect them for putting information about the USS Liberty, because I'm a history buff, and growing up, there was no such information about that anywhere. I've been to Navy museums. I've been to Washington, D.C. multiple times when I was a kid. Went to the Air and Space Museum probably 5, 6 times. I've been to the Smithsonian multiple times. I've been to all the museums throughout Washington. And not once did I ever hear anything about the USS Liberty. So it's good that there's a museum that actually has information showing you what happened. And I'm glad that he actually sits down and takes the time to talk with the survivors of the Liberty and shows them respect. See, that comes from his father being in the military. And I'm sure it's just because Gary's a him being a nice guy is part of it too. But it just goes to show you he has respect for people that served because of his father's service, and he treats them like the human beings they should be treated, and he treats them with a little bit of dignity, and you'd be surprised what kind of information you can get out of the older generations with that. Instead of treating them like let's strap grandma to the roof of the car and take her for a ride. That's what everybody's being taught. We don't need old people. Remember, everybody that's in their 30s nowadays, by the way, I know I'm getting off track here a little bit, but just remember, everybody's in their 30s and 40s and 50s, and they're like, oh, I'm not worried about death panels. Old people, sometimes they can be a pain in the ass, blah, 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 blah. Just remember, you're going to be old within the next 30 years, and if all this crap that's going on now is law by then, what happens? Well, you're 60. You're no longer useful, but I'm healthy. I'm sorry, sir. The cutoff age is 60. Bam! Into the pit your body goes. Or by that time, they'll probably melt you down and drink you. They're actually doing that with people's bodies now, by the way. Instead of burial because of lack of space. You could just get cremated, but whatever. For lack of space, instead of getting cremated, they're dipping bodies in a solution which melts you, and then it puts you back into the water system, pretty much. So, Soylent Green. That's where we're headed. We're headed right down Soylent Green Road. All right, I don't want to digress too much. I'm glad that everybody is actually waking up. I'm glad to say that compared to, 5 years ago was obviously... people were still kind of brain dead. People were a little bit awake. But I'll say even 2008 compared to now, the election time, I remember going into the election compared to going into the election now for 2012. And it's just inspiring to see more people awake and involved and realizing what the true dangers are. And I out of nowhere today, somebody came up to me. We were talking, and she mentioned Ron Paul. It was an older lady, and she mentioned Ron Paul to me, and I looked at her because she was like the last person I would have thought to bring him up. And she says, I really like that old guy. He's the only one up there that talks truth. The rest of them, they all keep talking, oh, we need to bomb this country, we need to bomb that country. We can't afford that. We can't afford any of that. And all these young kids coming back, hurt or dead. We can't afford that. And I'm quoting her. And she looked at me and she was like, he's the only one I like. She's like, I heard him talk. I've heard of him before, and they always call him crazy and stuff. So I sat down last night and I wanted to see why they called him crazy. And I sat down and I listened to him talk. She said, I didn't hear anything crazy about what came out of his mouth. She goes, I heard truth. I heard the right things. She goes, I heard, and it was the exact opposite of what everybody else was saying. And now I understand. And I was like, you see? It's the light bulb was just, it wasn't dim. It wasn't super, 100 watt yet. It was about 65 watts, but it was going brighter than it was, days ago. Not saying she was dumb by any means, but she bought more into the into the left-right lie. And she realizes that Obama is a liar. She knows he's a liar. She's seen firsthand that he's lied because she works on the inside. And I won't say what she does or what she works for. Or who she works for, I should say. But she knows that she knows the deal. She knows, she sees with her own eyes. She's not stupid. She doesn't drink the Kool-Aid. She knows that they just keep pushing war. She knows Obama is a puppet. And she doesn't believe any of the GOP guys either. And she was just... She was like, they always say he's a kook, and I always thought he was a kook, but I wasn't too sure. And then after watching him last night, she's like, he's not a kook. He's not crazy at all. No, he's not. He's not crazy. He's not crazy, Uncle Ron, like Jon Stewart said, or the 13th floor on a hotel. I mean, it's ridiculous. Did you see the coverage yesterday of Super Tuesday? Anyone? Bueller? Did anybody catch it? Did you notice MSNBC? I think it was MSNBC, if I remember correctly. They didn't even advertise. Most of them didn't in their openings. They would show you pictures of Romney, Santorum, and Gingrich. You never, ever, ever. I think once maybe you saw Paul. It was like he didn't exist. Just didn't exist. Are you kidding me? Compared to 2008 till now, you know how many people are out? I fear that this might be. I shouldn't say fear because I don't put out that vibe. But let me rephrase that. I foresee that this could be the last chance we have because Obama being a lame duck president would be bad, and Mitt Romney going up against Obama is an Obama win. Even if Mitt Romney got in, it's Obamney. So they are the same person. Yeah, we need to change. We need to throw the wrench into the works, or else we're going to be in deep trouble, ladies and gentlemen. All right, we're going to break. Stay tuned. We will be right back. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back. I don't know if you heard this today, but Obama, well, not so much him, but Leon Panetta, he being a part of the Obama admin, so the Obama admin, via Leon Panetta, told Congress today that he would seek the Obama administration will seek international permission to attack Syria and will inform Congress of their plan. Did you hear what I just said? Did you hear it? Let me go back. Let me go back again, just in case. The Obama administration will seek international permission to attack Syria and will inform Congress of their plan. I want to play this clip from CNN because it's funny how they're talking about Syria, they're putting up this propaganda, and then you hear them talk about how Leon Panetta brought this up, and they're like, "Ooh, it caused quite the stir on Capitol Hill today." And you should have seen the one congressman's face. I can't remember who it was, but he's like, his eyes and his mouth were agape because he couldn't believe what he just heard Panetta say.
The president says he wants to exhaust diplomatic efforts, but for the first time, signs that President Obama has started discussing options with his military.
The President of the United States, through the National Security Staff, has asked us to begin the commander's estimate.
That's General Martin Dempsey, the Joint Chiefs Chairman.
Estimate of the situation.
CNN was first to report military planning was underway. On Wednesday, the nation's top officer told a Senate committee those options include humanitarian relief, a no-fly zone, intervention at sea, and airstrikes.
A no-fly zone. Libya Part 2. Airstrikes. Oh, here we go. Intervention at sea. Oh, here we go.
But I want to be clear. We can do anything. The question is, so it's not about can we do it, it's should we do it.
Senator John McCain continued to insist the U.S. should.
Can you tell us how much longer the killing would have to continue? How many additional civilian lives would have to be lost? How many more have to die? 10,000 more? 20,000 more?
Before I recommend that we put our sons and daughters in uniform in harm's way, I've got to make very sure that we know what the mission is.
That's Leon Panetta talking, the Secretary of Defense.
I've got to make very sure that we know whether we can achieve that mission.
Panetta said U.S. ground troops are not being considered. U.S. concerns, however, a fractured opposition with nearly 100 groups. Airstrikes could take hundreds of aircraft and weeks of bombing to destroy Syria's air defenses.
They have approximately 5 times more more sophisticated air defense systems than existed in Libya, covering 1/5 of the terrain.
Let me explain something really quick. There's a fallacy here that people are going to overlook. They say there won't be any boots on the ground, but it'll take weeks to knock things out with airstrikes. Well, that's because you have to insert special forces on the ground with laser designators, and they have to go find the targets and paint them to guide in these 2,000-pound, sometimes 5,000-pound bombs. And now they have the mother of all bombs, the Moab, and they have something even bigger now, I think. And now they're trying to make something even bigger. I believe it's something like 200 feet they want to be able to go underneath the ground. I think right now the current is like 100, and they want to be able to go double that, something like that. Anyway, they have all this ordnance, and they want to go bomb the hell out of they want to go bomb Syria. It was, remember, Wesley Clark talked about this. He said that after 9/11, he had talked to somebody that said he saw, and he showed him the info, and he saw this list of a bunch of countries that they were going to go after, and Syria was one of them. So was Libya, Iraq, Iran, and they keep pushing Iran, Syria, Iran, Syria, Iran, Syria. And I think a lot of I said this the other day when Joe and I were covering Bob's show, I think a lot of the talk with Iran right now, and I think a lot of yes, I think that they want to attack. I think Israel is pushing for it. But at the same time, I think that this administration is using that as a cover to get away with more and more things in Syria. They want to arm the rebels. They want to bring NATO said, we're not going in. So now you got John McCain pushing for airstrikes. We have to go in. We have to go in. No, we don't. First of all, Al-Qaeda, the Al-Qaeda fighters that were in Libya, they've been sent to Syria to go help the quote-unquote Free Syrian Army. And they contradict themselves so much. It's just unbelievable. I could go on and on and on, but I want you to hear the rest of the clip. Hold on.
Has said it wouldn't make sense for the U.S. to act unilaterally, but he set off a firestorm when he said the U.S. would want international permission, but might not seek congressional approval for military action.
Our goal would be to seek international permission, and we would come to the Congress and inform you.
I'm almost breathless about that, because what I heard you say is we're going to seek international approval, and they will come and tell the Congress what we might do, and we might seek congressional approval.
And that was Senator Jeff Sessions. I mean, that's incredible. You just heard the Secretary of Defense say, we're going to go seek international approval. They're telling you they want to strike Syria. It's right in your face. If they say, oh, no, we're not pushing for strikes, yeah, they are. You just heard Panetta say, we are going to seek international approval for an attack on Syria. And then we will let the Congress know what's up. Maybe we'll ask for your okay, but it really doesn't matter. We're going to do it. They just told you Obama is going to start another war. You just heard what he said. You're not quite sure you're not quite sure you heard that right? Here, I'll play it back again for you, just in case. Let me rewind it a little bit here so you can hear it again. You can listen to what Panetta said here.
Might not seek congressional approval for military action.
Our goal would be to seek international permission, and we would come to the Congress and inform you.
I'm almost
Our goal would be to seek international permission, and we would come to Congress and inform you. Excuse me, Secretary Panetta, remember that piece of paper you took an oath to defend and protect and uphold? Let me ask you something. Did you happen to read it? Do you happen to understand anything about it? Do you happen to understand how the government is supposed to work? You have three branches: the executive, the legislative, and the judicial. Very basic stuff. Are you forgetting something, sir? Because to me, you sound quite like the minion of a dictator. We're going to go seek international permission, and we'll let you know what we're going to do. So they're just bypassing Congress. They're telling Congress you're ceremonial. And where would Obama think he would get power like that from? Oh, that's right. Because of George Bush Jr.'s executive orders. Now it all makes sense. Presidents don't always sign executive orders that benefit them. Often they sign executive orders that will benefit the next president. But it's not a conspiracy. No. They're your best friends and they have your best interests at heart. Unbelievable. Here, I'll play the rest of the clip.
Breathless about that. Because what I heard you say is we're going to seek international approval and they will come and tell the Congress what we might do, and we might seek congressional approval.
Now, we just finished talking to Senator Sessions privately a few minutes ago, and he remains very concerned, Wolf. His feeling is that time may be running out in Syria, but not for Assad. He thinks time may be running out for the U.S. and the allies to intervene, that Assad actually, in recent days and weeks, has been gaining momentum on the ground in Syria, and that the administration could be desperately wrong, that it may not be inevitable that Assad's regime will fall. So this is all shaping up to be quite a dire situation for many different reasons, Wolf.
Yeah.
You see how she contradicts herself there? We talked to him in private, Senator Sessions, the same guy that was saying, well, you're going to go to war without talking to us. And she says, oh, but he backs going in there. He pretty much backs it. In private, no video footage of it, no audio, but he backs it. Sure. We're going to break, ladies and gentlemen. We will be right back. They're just going to start World War III, and they don't care. Somebody in the chat during the break, I noticed, said, because I don't try not to pay attention to the chat while I'm on air because that'll throw you off. But during the break, I usually go through it and see if anybody has any questions or anything. And somebody had made a comment when I was playing the clip with Panetta, and they said that's treason. And I thought that, I figured since I had Gary on, and we were talking about the Cold War and the era of Kennedy, I would wrap everything up together and show you that this treason goes back a very long time. No, I'm not talking about the assassination of Kennedy, although that's part of it. But this little clip is something I've played often on air before. This little ditty. I'm sure you might some of you, more than one or two of you, might have heard this once or twice. It's LBJ admitting the murder of South Vietnam's president, Diem, who was their man, and they felt he was corrupt. He wasn't doing what they wanted. He wasn't playing ball, and they murdered him. I just want to. I'm going to play this 21 seconds of audio as a way of showing you the corruption and how far back it goes, just for the new listeners, in case you haven't heard this. This is, at the time, a sitting president admitting to committing assassination of another country's leader. That is a war crime.
They started with me on Jim, you remember. He was corrupt and he ought to be killed. So we killed him. We all got together and got a goddamn bunch of thugs, and we went in and assassinated him. Now, we really had no political stability since then.
And he was talking about Vietnam. Assassinating a nation's leader and then admitting that there isn't any political stability inside that country since they killed the nation's leader. Where have I seen that played out before? Should I start naming the countries? Iraq, Libya, what they want to do with Assad over in Syria. I don't get up here and talk about this stuff for my health. I mean, this is all connected. So just as a way of showing you how far back it goes, there's a quick little thing. And here, you sure, new listeners? Popeye, I didn't quite hear it. Are you? Who was that? This is President Lyndon Baines Johnson admitting to murdering another head of state. Listen.
They started with me on Jim, you remember. He was corrupt and he ought to be killed. So we killed him. We all got together and got a goddamn bunch of thugs, and we went in and assassinated him. Now, we really had no political stability since then.
Oh, that's nice. Thank you for admitting to a war crime, sir. That's awesome. Assassination is gets against the Geneva Conventions. That's punishable by imprisonment and possibly death. Very nice. Very good job. Very good. Ladies and gentlemen, it is unbelievable. And then I have something else I want to play really quick before I get into anything and I start ranting, because we will run out of time. As we all know, I can get long-winded. I want to play the audio from this really quick. It's about 2.5 minutes. This is, I've gotten multiple requests because I have this on all of my YouTube channels. And the day after, or actually it was the day Breitbart died, that morning when I found out, I re-uploaded a copy of this to FederalJack Tube 6. And it went viral on that channel as it did on the other ones. But I've had some requests to play it on air so people can turn the audio up and make their people in their house, whoever, their friends, loved ones, whatever, listen to it, because they won't sit and watch the YouTube video. So for everybody that requested it, here you go. Turn up the volume. The CIA's heart attack gun. Are you all ready? Here you go.
Then I went to technical services, where I was in charge of finding documents that you don't find in libraries, like where you put explosives on a bridge. Where's the best place to put an explosive on a bridge, and what kind of explosive do you have to get that goes underwater without destroying its effectiveness. Also, I had to find, one time they wanted me to find out if there was such a thing as a poison that was undetectable, especially one that seemed to mimic a heart attack, that would kill someone, but it would appear that they had a heart attack. I did find such a thing.
Does this pistol fire the dart?
Yes, it does, Mr. Chairman, and a special one was developed which potentially would be able to enter the target without perception.
The poison was frozen into some sort of dart, and then it was shot at very high speed into the...
And by the way, that audio you heard where he was saying, Mr. Chairman, that's being done in the halls of Congress. This is a hearing, and they're holding the gun up. There's video of it. Just go to FederalJack Tube 6. The video is right on the front page. It's the featured video. It's the CIA's heart attack gun. Here's the rest of the audio.
Person, so when it reached the person, it would melt inside them, and the only thing would be like one little tiny red dot on their body, which was hard to detect. There wouldn't be a needle left or anything like that in the person.
But also the toxin itself would not appear in the autopsy?
Yes, so that there was no way of perceiving that the target was hit.
I think the first time that I seriously questioned anything that was more than... I just couldn't take it anymore, was when I came across this document. It was eyes only, and it was to my boss, but he only had one hand and a hook in the other hand, so I always opened all of his mail and his packages and so forth. And this one, he wasn't in the office. I opened it and I read it. It said eyes only. I wanted to read it because I wasn't supposed to, probably. And it was a report about a mission where they had blown up a bridge in Asia somewhere, and they had killed a number of women and children who were on their way to market that morning. It was reported as though they were really proud, mission accomplished. That one bothered me a lot. When my boss came in, I gave him his mail and I mentioned this, and I said, "This is wrong. These women hadn't done anything. These children didn't deserve to die. Why did we do that?" And he said, that's the fortunes of war. And I said, "But we're not at war. We're certainly not at war in that country. Why did we do that? I don't understand it." And he said, "Well, you're very young. When you get older, you'll understand those things."
And it just continues on. I just wanted to play you those two clips. One, because I said I've gotten a few requests for it. And the other one I wanted to play so you guys could hear it as well. But it goes to show how deep this corruption is. You got Johnson admitting that they killed the president of Vietnam, or South Vietnam, who they put in at the time. He was their guy. He wasn't towing the line, so him and his brother had to go. And then you have the information on the heart attack gun. And it was, congressional hearings. They're looking at it. Barry Goldwater's there looking at it, going, maybe I shouldn't piss people off. But it's amazing the stuff that they have out there. So I don't know if they killed Breitbart, by the way. I'm not saying they did. Some people are saying they did. I'd have to investigate it further. I actually haven't had a chance to look into it as much as maybe I should. But first instinct, I would say I think it's very suspicious, and they do have the capability of doing it, especially if they know he has a weak heart. It wouldn't be too hard to poison him and take him out. Even the slightest amount of poison would probably affect him much differently than it would somebody else with a much stronger heart. So who knows? It would not surprise me. Do I know that the evidence exists to say definitely yes? I have seen articles stating such, but I have not gotten a chance to read the articles. I have them open in a browser with about 35 other tabs, but I have not gotten a chance to get into it yet. So I promise I will get into it in the next few days, and I'll touch on it in a later show. While I have a minute or two left, I want to talk about future guests coming up. I'm going to have Dr. Dahlia Wasfi coming on the show. I've been in contact with her, and we're working out on getting a date set in stone for when she's going to come on. But I will let everybody know she will be coming on, and I'll see if I can get her on as a reoccurring guest. But as you all know, I've played her speeches on the show before, so I'm kind of excited that I'll be able to get her on, and we'll be able to get into a lot of stuff. She knows a lot about the war crimes and the stuff that I've talked about. If anybody heard me on the Bob Tuskin show yesterday, I covered for Bob yesterday, and I played audio from the movie The Dark Side, On the Dark Side in Eldora, A Soldier in the Shadows, the story of PFC John Needham. And I actually did a podcast about it as well for the Intel Hub, because the information needs to get out there. So make sure you guys spread that as well. Well, the music is coming up, ladies and gentlemen, and that means I'm out of time for tonight. But I will be back this Friday. And make sure you tune in. Hacker Winston Smith is going to be here live in studio with me. And we're going to be getting into what's going on with Anonymous, LulzSec, the arrest, the FBI informant thing, and more. So make sure you tune in Friday. Hacker Winston Smith will be back with me live. See you then.